Your body didn't quit, your mind did. Your muscles still had reps left. Your lungs still had air. Your legs still had steps. But your mind said stop, and you listened. You obeyed. You let a thought dictate reality. You let a feeling become a fact. You reached a point where it hurt, and you called that a limit. But it wasn't a limit. It was discomfort. And discomfort convinced you it was your maximum. So you stopped. Right before the breakthrough. Right before the growth. Right before the transformation. You stopped where it hurt. And pain is not the end. Pain is the entrance. Listen closely. The limit you feel is not the end. It's a test. You've been lied to by comfort. Comfort taught you that when something hurts, you should stop. That when something feels hard, you should rest. That when something challenges you, you should retreat. And you believed it. Feels wise. Feels like self-care. But comfort is a trap. It keeps you right where you are. It convinces you that your current capacity is your permanent ceiling. That the point where you feel tired is the point where you must stop. But that's not how limits work. That's how comfort works. It trains you to quit early, to call exhaustion the end, to label hard as impossible. You stop when you're tired. Everyone does. That's the default, the automatic response. The mind feels fatigue and translates it as done. But tired is not done. Tired is a signal, a warning. Your body's saying this is uncomfortable, and you've been programmed to treat uncomfortable as unacceptable. So the moment you feel resistance, you stop. The moment you feel burn, you quit. The moment you feel doubt, you retreat. And every time you do that, you train yourself to stop earlier next time. You lower your threshold. You teach your mind that discomfort means danger. That effort means too much. That challenge means stop. You call it listening to your body. But you're listening to fear. Fear of pain. Fear of failure. Fear of finding out you're not as strong as you thought. So you stop before you have to face that. You stop before you're actually finished. You stop at the first warning sign and call it wisdom. But wisdom doesn't quit when things get hard. Wisdom pushes through to find out what's on the other side, and what's on the other side of your perceived limit, your actual limit. And it's much further than you think. Limits are not walls, they're suggestions. They're your mind's best guess at what you can handle based on past experience, based on old data, based on who you used to be. But you're not who you used to be. You've trained since then. You've grown since then. You've evolved since then. But your mind still references old limits, old ceilings, old agreements you made with yourself when you were weaker. And you keep honoring those agreements. You keep stopping at the same point, feeling the same burn, hitting the same wall. Not because that's your limit, because that's where you're used to quitting. The truth is simple. Limits are warnings, not commands. Your body warns you when you're approaching discomfort, when you're entering territory that requires adaptation, when you're pushing past familiar, and that warning feels like a limit, feels like you can't, feels like you're at the edge. But you're not at the edge. You're at the beginning of growth. The beginning of expansion. The beginning of discovering capacity you didn't know existed. But you'll never discover it if you stop at the warning. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is the doorway. The threshold between who you are and who you can become. And most people stand at that doorway and turn around. They feel the burn and decide it's not worth it. They feel the fatigue and decide they've done enough. They feel the discomfort and decide to come back another day. But another day never comes because the doorway is always painful. The threshold is always uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to walk through pain, you'll never access the version of yourself that lives on the other side. This is where it changes, right here. In this moment. You feel the resistance, you feel the burn, you feel the limit approaching, and instead of stopping, you decide to continue. Not because it feels good, because you refuse to let a feeling control you. You refuse to let discomfort dictate your ceiling. You refuse to honor agreements you made with weakness. This is conscious override. This is the moment your will becomes stronger than your feelings. And you move. One more rep, one more step, one more breath. Not because you want to, because you decided to. And decisions are stronger than sensations. Discipline doesn't care about pain. Discipline doesn't negotiate with fatigue. Discipline doesn't stop when it's hard. Discipline executes. Regardless. You train when you're tired, not rested. Tired. You train when you're sore, not recovered. Sore. You train when every part of you wants to stop. That's when discipline activates. Not when you feel strong, when you feel weak. Not when you're motivated, when you're empty. That's the training that matters. That's the training that builds something unbreakable. Because anyone can push when they feel good. Warriors push when they feel broken. You show up when there's nothing left. When motivation is dead. When energy is gone, when belief is shaken, you show up anyway, empty, and you pour from emptiness. You give from nothing, you execute from exhaustion. And that's where real strength forms. Not in the easy sessions, not in the days you feel invincible, in the days you feel defeated, and you refuse to act defeated. In the moments you want to quit, and you choose to continue. That's not just discipline. That's transformation. You repeat effort without reward, no progress, no applause, no visible change, just work, day after day, pushing the same weight, running the same distance, fighting the same resistance, and nothing seems to move. Nothing seems to improve, but you keep going. Not because you see results, because you committed to the process, and the process doesn't reward you every day. It tests you every day to see if you're serious, to see if you'll quit when it gets boring, when it gets repetitive, when it stops feeling special, and most people quit here. When effort stops producing immediate feedback. But you continue, silent, steady, relentless. No posting, no complaining, no announcing. You disappear into the work, into the suffering, into the discipline that no one sees and no one celebrates. You push through pain in private. You break through limits in silence. You train when everyone else is sleeping. You execute when everyone else is scrolling. And you don't talk about it. You don't share it. You don't need validation for it. Because you're not doing it for attention. You're doing it for transformation. And transformation doesn't happen on camera. It happens in the dark, in the early morning, in the late night, when no one is watching except you. No applause, no recognition, no external reward, just internal commitment. Just the knowledge that you showed up when you didn't have to. That you pushed when you could have stopped. That you continued when every excuse was available. And that knowledge builds something no compliment ever could. It builds self-respect. The kind that doesn't need anyone else's approval. The kind that doesn't fluctuate with opinions. The kind that's earned through private discipline and silent suffering. That's the foundation. That's the core. That's what makes you unbreakable. Only work. Repetitive. Boring. Unsexy, unglamorous work, the same movements, the same routines, the same discipline, day after day, week after week, month after month, while everyone else is looking for shortcuts, looking for hacks, looking for the easy way. You're doing the work, the hard way, the long way, the only way that actually works. And it's lonely, it's exhausting, it's thankless, but it's effective. And effective beats exciting every single time. Muscles screaming, lungs burning, heart pounding, mind begging you to stop. This is the moment. The exact moment where most people quit, where the body sends every signal to retreat. where discomfort becomes unbearable, where the easy choice is right there. Stop, rest, come back tomorrow. And you feel it. The pull, the temptation, the logical argument for quitting. But you don't stop. You don't retreat. You don't take the easy choice. You take one more step, one more rep, one more breath. Not because you're superhuman, because you refuse to be controlled by discomfort. Mind steady, body breaking, but the mind doesn't break. The mind watches the body scream and decides anyway. Decides to continue. Decides that pain is temporary, but quitting is permanent. Decides that this moment is the difference between who you were and who you're becoming. And in that decision, everything changes. Not your circumstances, not your fatigue, not your pain, your relationship to them. You stop being controlled by them. You stop being stopped by them. You acknowledge them and move anyway. This is where others stop. You see them in the gym, in life, hitting resistance and immediately retreating, feeling discomfort and immediately adjusting, encountering difficulty and immediately quitting. They call it being smart, being realistic, being balanced. But you know what it really is. It's stopping at the warning. It's treating suggestions like commands. It's letting the mind's fear dictate the body's capacity. And you refuse to do that. You refuse to stop where they stop. You refuse to quit where they quit. You continue into the pain, through the resistance, beyond the limit they accepted. This is who you are now, not someone trying to push past limits. Someone who doesn't recognize limits as real. Someone who sees resistance as training, pain as feedback, fatigue as conditioning. You don't avoid discomfort, you seek it. You don't run from hard, you run toward it. Because you've learned what most people never learn, that everything you want lives on the other side of the limit you're afraid to push past. And you're not afraid anymore, not because pain stopped hurting, because you stopped letting pain stop you. You fight beyond limits, not occasionally, constantly. Every training session, every work session, every moment where comfort suggests stopping and discipline demands continuing. You choose discipline. You choose to push. You choose to break through instead of giving in. And that choice compounds into strength, into resilience, into a version of yourself that's unrecognizable to who you used to be. Because who you used to be stopped at limits. And who you are now, you don't even see them. Comment no limits if you refuse to quit when it hurts.